So starting at the top, kind of the first big matchup, Florida State beats Clemson 31-24 in overtime. I thought Clemson looked pretty good. Like their receivers made some plays. Klubnik made a few throws, but they sort of crapped the bed down the stretch. And yeah, what did you think about that game?
No, the same. I think, okay, Clemson outplayed Florida State through most of that game, probably three
Yeah.
quarters of that game. Clemson was the better team there. Had a big lead early, and like they were driving with a 7-point lead. It was 24-17, and Clemson's driving in Florida State territory. And then that sack fumble happens as a scoop and score, ties it up at 24. And I mean, Clemson obviously never scores again. But that, like, Clemson was the better team there. I kind of kept coming back to that, is that, I mean, we thought the line was maybe a little bit low. Although I think Florida State was favored by two, anywhere between 1 and 3 points, depending where you looked, leading up to that game. And it felt low, right? Like that felt like, what, Florida State's a better team than Clemson with what we've seen. Like the line was right. Like the line was absolutely appropriate. They were toe-to-toe with Florida State, and they outplayed them for a large chunks of that game. The receivers, I think, like to your point, we saw Tyler Brown. I know they brought him up a lot. He was productive. Like they had, and it wasn't just him either.
Bo
There was
Collins?
Stellato had a couple of nice catches. Like I think they were on like third downs. That meant a lot. Shipley is obviously just a beast. Both catching and running. He was a stud. I thought, I don't know. Like, is it possible? Clemson's 2-2 right now, but is it possible for me to think like that's a darn good 2-2 football team?
No, I agree completely. It doesn't feel like a 2-2 football team. It doesn't. They feel like they should still be one of those 15 teams that feels like they have a good shot to make the playoff. Now, Clemson's not going to make the playoff. You can't lose those big games,
right?
Two of them, and still go. But I mean, there's not a game left in their schedule that they can't win. And they haven't played a game this year they couldn't win. So I didn't like down at the end of the game. And the storyline is they bring in this walk-on kicker who I guess was their backup the last several years. And it basically retired because he knew he wasn't going to be the guy this year. And the guy they had in wasn't cutting it. So they call this guy who's only taking online classes at this point. They bring him in for the week. He hits a 30-yard field goal in the first half. It's a great story. And then they're driving at the end of the game in Florida State territory. They have a 3rd and 11, and they call a QB draw.
Yeah.
With the obvious intent of setting up the field goal, not turning the ball over. And Cade Klubnik had played a pretty good game. Their receivers had played a pretty good game. They had 0 turnovers at that point.
Right.
I would have loved to see them try something. Try to pick up that first down. And he misses the 30-yard field goal, and they go to overtime and lose. Is that the way you would have played it? Like were they just trying to get as good of a field goal for him as possible, or do you have to try to? I mean, it's 3rd and 11. It's not easy, but you have to try to make that happen, I think.
Yeah, they had been converting third downs throughout the game, which is kind of where that's where it was a little bit surprising. Like Klubnik through the air was converting third downs. Now they didn't have a great percentage. I think they were 6 of 14, but like they were better. They had a better percentage than Florida State did. Like they were better on third downs than Florida State was for sure. And kind of speaking to the dominance of Clemson in this game, and dominance is maybe not the right word, but they had far more total yards. Florida State was held to 22 rushing yards. That's not enough. 22 rushing yards on 20 attempts. Now that factors in sacks, but I mean, Clemson had 146 on the ground. It's seldom that you have that much of a disparity in rushing and lose the football game. And obviously, turnover, like the turnover was that one fumble was massive and it kind of offset everything else. But you're right. Like Clemson had more first downs. They were better on third downs, had more rushing yards, and had about the same amount of passing yards. Like Clemson was the better football team there, and it would have been nice to trust Klubnik. I think the coaching staff is still doesn't quite totally trust Klubnik all the time. Like I think they kind of bailed on him a little bit there. And
it's a lot of perimeter passing, that type of thing.
Right.
And then overtime, Was it in overtime? I think. Yeah, they had the ball after Florida
Mm-hmm.
State had scored a touchdown.
Yeah.
And they have 3rd and 1. And they call an RPO, but it was clearly like hand the ball off and get the yard. And he chose to swing it out to a wide receiver who just got blown up for a loss. And then they couldn't convert on 4th down, and that's how you lose. So bad decision making. But he was making some throws throughout the game, and I agree with you. It looks like they don't quite totally trust him.
So, and then one more point, kind of on the Clemson play calling thing. So Florida State gets the ball first in overtime, obviously score a touchdown. I mean, a great throw to Coleman there in the corner. Clemson gets the ball. Klubnik throws an incomplete pass on 2nd and 10. Shipley runs for 10 or 9 yards, almost 10. So he almost got the first down just short. 2nd and, I mean, so it puts you 3rd and like a short one. And then they go pass. Like Clemson goes pass on 3rd and 1, pass on 4th and 1. They don't pick it up. For Shipley not to get the ball, like that's your best player. And for him not to be getting the ball, he's a matchup nightmare. Like get him in space. I'm not saying you have to run it with him. Like you can still throw the ball to him, but you definitely could run it with him. Like it was working, I guess was my point. And 3rd and 1, 4th and 1. You got to have it. And get your best player the ball and kind of get out of the way. That I thought you possibly overthought. Maybe you overthink that one just a little bit.
For sure.
The coach, the play calling, they were definitely sketchy in spots. Like Clemson was the better football team. Clemson's players were better than Florida State's players. Like you're not going to be able to convince me otherwise. But there was definitely some questionable play calling. I don't know. The only other thing I could think of maybe is the fumble, the sack on Klubnik and the fumble. It was just really poor blitz pickup by the running back. Like you have to have that. And then Klubnik also has to know, like you have to at least look. Like you can't, like he never even saw the guy. And then, that was just a devastating play. So like Florida State's good. Florida State deserves to be where they're at. However, I'm like, Jordan Travis wasn't it, man. Like I know he's going to finish with a good stat line, and he had the great play in overtime to win the ball game for him. But like Clemson's defensive line had him seeing, like he was seeing ghosts out there for large portions of that game is what it looked like.
Yeah, I think he was hurt a little bit, but I don't know. It does kind of feel like Florida State. Now, obviously, they had a very impressive win in Week 1 against LSU.
Right.
They sort of feel like they might be the team that just gets crushed in the playoff this year. Or maybe they don't make it. Maybe Clemson finds a way to crawl back into the ACC championship game. I mean, it's a long shot at this point, but it could happen.
Right.
I think I'd probably take Clemson in that situation. I don't know.
It's going to be hard for you to rush for as few yards as they did and beat anyone good. Like you can't be rushing for 22 yards. And I know that's like sack adjusted and everything, but like the point stands for itself. Like you can't rush for 1.1 yards a carry and have any success against decent teams, especially in the playoffs. Like you can maybe get through, some mediocre teams. You possibly can win the ACC doing that. But you're not going to have a chance against, the Ohio States, Michigans, Georgias of the world. Like that's a different ball game for Florida State.
Yep. Okay. I'm just going to read off a bunch of scores of games that we're not going to talk about here, but games that mattered. Friday, Wisconsin beat Purdue 38-17. NC State beat Virginia 24-21. Boise State beat San Diego State 34-31. Air Force beat San Jose State 45-20. Air Force pretty good, by the way. Getting into Saturday, Oklahoma beat Cincinnati 20-6. Marshall beat Virginia Tech at Virginia Tech 24-17. Oof. Texas A&M sat on Auburn 27-10.
Yep. TCU
beat SMU 34-17. Michigan beat Rutgers 31-7. Kansas beat BYU 38-27. We'll have more later, but now we'll get into some games that we actually want to talk about. Number 11, Utah beats number 22, UCLA, 14-7. This game was at Rice-Eccles, Utah's stadium there. Dante Moore, who we both love, UCLA's quarterback, true freshman, first throw of the game, pick 6.
Yep.
And then there were 2 touchdowns total scored the rest of the way. What do you think?
So this was a game that I gave out on one of my locks of the week. And I thought the over was going to hit. I was certain that Cam Rising was going to play in this game. Why would he be cleared for practice for the last 2 weeks and not go you know, against a ranked opponent. Why would you not be starting him at UCLA? Well, they didn't, and it actually didn't matter. They had a pick six on the very first play of the game. And from then on, Utah was average. They were average as grits. They really weren't great.
Yeah.
I mean, UCLA outgained them, but not by much. I mean, it was just a rock fight pretty much. Like, it wasn't pretty. Nothing was nice about it. UCLA was 3 of 17 on third downs, and 1 of 4 on fourth downs. Like, yeah, it's not enough. That's not good enough. So I don't know what to think of these teams. I really don't. I think Utah, this was discouraging for both of these teams. I know Utah won this game, but I feel less good about Utah going and winning the Pac-12 now. I mean, I obviously don't feel as good about UCLA's future. Because the Pac-12 is good, like legitimately really, really good. We've seen some teams out there, Oregon, Washington, USC, even from time to time, that just come out and just lay the wood to people week in, week out. Like, they just hammer people. So Utah not being able to score points and UCLA not being able to score points is not going to bode well for them in conference play.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more just about the larger outlook on that. Utah, they're 4-0 and they have like some solid wins under their belt, including Florida, obviously. And yet it sort of feels like they're clearly a tier 2 Pac-12 program, which, you know, is dangerous to say, obviously. But yeah, I was impressed by both defenses, but neither offense really all that impressive in this game. Okay, another big matchup in the afternoon window that was very hyped, and I think both of us kind of thought it might be a little overhyped. But Oregon beat Colorado 42-6, 35-0 at halftime. Never in doubt. At one point, for most of the game, Colorado had 10 times as much yardage as Oregon had 10 times as much yardage as Colorado. Is this just as simple as, like, obviously Colorado is better than they were last year, but like, it's still, you're comparing a nice story, a nice little upstart team who has a chance to make a bowl game with Oregon, who is a legitimate top 10 powerhouse at this point.
Oh, I mean, I think water will find its level at some point. You know what? I think this is one of those games. This did not change my view of Colorado that much. Like Colorado played out. I mean, they played way in front of their skis for the first 3 weeks. They go 3-0. Majorly punching above their weight. Mm-hmm. And yeah, like they snuck past a Colorado State team last week. I mean, and good for them, but they should have lost that game. Like, Colorado was lucky to be 3-0. And that's fine. Like no one's disparaging Colorado. Colorado was awful last year. Like, Colorado was really, really, really bad. The worst team in the Power 5. And yeah, like this is going to be part of the journey. Like, this is part of the come up. You don't get just to be fantastic year one. Like, it's going to take some time. There's too many programs like Oregon that have recruited well for a long time. They have a veteran quarterback. Like, we saw what a true Heisman contender at quarterback looks like. The Shedeur Sanders stuff was overblown. He's a good quarterback, Sanders is, but he's not Bo Nix. And we saw that in this game. Bo Nix and Penix out there in Washington are legit studs at quarterback. And there's a difference. I think Oregon was just significantly better on both offensive and defensive lines.
That's the key, yeah.
It was blatantly obvious for all of us to see. I mean, there was pretty much just it'll be interesting to see how Colorado handles it. Like, their offensive line is not going to get that much better this year. Like, there's only so much you can do there. And yeah, I think it's kind of getting exposed. They can't really run the ball anymore, and they definitely can't pass protect. So Colorado's not the 19th best team in the country. They were ranked number 19. They were not the 19th best. And that's okay. Like, that is okay. And I know there's a ton of casuals out there they're just kind of getting into college football, and Colorado's who they're rooting for. And that's good. That's fine. Good for you. But do understand that there's a lot of people out here that have been doing this for a really, really long time and are really, really good at it. And a program like Oregon is one of them. Like, there's levels to this, and you can get there. Colorado can get there, but you have to build, and you don't get to just come in and walk all over Oregon. I guess is that fair? Is that unfair of me to say?
No, that's totally fair. And I think one of the things that you talk about, the casuals out there, like, most of them are NFL fans.
Right.
And
yeah.
the team with the best offensive and defensive lines in the NFL matched up with the team that with the worst line play in the NFL. There's not that big of a gap compared to what you see in college routinely when teams like Oregon play teams like Colorado. And so I think for some of those casuals, they see, oh, Colorado, they've got a really good quarterback. They got some good receivers.
Yeah.
You know, that's not where the game starts. And yeah, we've all seen guys like Peyton Manning and Aaron Rodgers like do really good things behind poor by NFL standards offensive lines. This is totally different. Like there's too much of a gap there. It's just not going to happen. Right. So yeah, there's just a fundamental difference between the NFL and college, and then the range of athlete you see from one team to team number 70.
Yeah, I think like recruiting rankings mattered here a lot. And then Oregon also they kind of called it off a little bit.
Definitely.
I know Dan Lanning at halftime, he was fairly like as he was interviewed as they were going into the half, he had a little bit of things to say, right? Like he was a little kind of cocky and like, we're going to come out and do the same thing in the second half. That was rhetoric only, because I mean, they pulled Bo Nix, shortly into the third quarter. They only scored 7 more points overall. I mean, Oregon could have doubled their score. I mean, they could have put up 35 in the second half too if they wanted. So Colorado couldn't stop the run. They couldn't really stop the pass. I honestly thought the game ended fairly well. Like for all the people that were saying, there might be fights or whatever will happen, I think everyone ended with respect for each other. Like hopefully they did. It definitely seemed that way. So at the end of the day, Colorado was just, they're not on the same level as Oregon right now. And they've got some work to do. They need to do some recruiting. Maybe recruit some high school players too. So like they've got some work to do. But they're on their way. It doesn't get a whole lot easier for them. Like Colorado, this is a bad year to be just breaking into the Pac-12. Like there's so many years where the Pac-12 would be a lot easier. This is just not one of those years. So on the Oregon standpoint though, like Oregon looks like a playoff team. Like
they're good.
Oregon's darn good right now. So the quarterback has seen it all. I mean, Bo Nix he's experienced. He processes super well, makes good decisions. They've got a good batch of receivers, especially that Franklin kid at wideout. He's elite. And Bo Nix also dual threat too. Like they do some neat things with how they use that. So really impressed with Oregon. This was the first time I really watched a complete Oregon game all year. But I just had to say, wow, like that's what really good looks like.
Absolutely. Okay, yet another huge middle afternoon matchup. Alabama beats Ole Miss 24-10. Honestly, like kind of they just sat on them. Like the defense played really well, and Jalen Milroe is still not all that good. Threw a terrible interception in the end zone.
Yes, he did.
But he's the best option they have, and he's good enough that they can beat solid teams like Ole Miss.
It was a little boring. Like this game, I tried to be into this game. I really did. But there was too much other stuff happening. Like this was a loaded Saturday and there was just too much other stuff happening. I will say this was disappointing from Ole Miss. Like Ole Miss had multiple chances to really take this game to Alabama and kind of run with it. They did. Ole Miss led throughout the first half. They led at halftime. It was only 7-6, but you led. Like Ole Miss had a lot of opportunities and they never ran with it. And I'm not sure what, like the play calling from Kiffin was a head scratcher. Like this is Kiffin needed this. Kiffin was chirping on Twitter the last 2 weeks, right? Getting prepared for this. This is what he lives for. He wants to beat Alabama. He wants to beat Saban. Like he doesn't hide that. He's pretty open with it. You can't score 10 points. Like Ole Miss defense played pretty well. They really did. They weren't bad. It was the Ole Miss offense that was not good. They just really weren't good against Alabama. And it was really disappointing. Like that's Kiffin's calling card. We needed more from Jackson Dart. We needed more from Quinshon Judkins. We needed just a lot more from them. And I don't know. I just kind of came out feeling blah. about Ole Miss. Like that was tough. That was a tough game to watch.
That's a little bit how I've felt about them all year. Like Jackson
Really,
Dart looks like he's better, but the running game is just complete 180 from last year. Last year
right? They can't run the ball. They
maybe
cannot
the
run the
best
ball.
running game in the SEC last year, and not even like it's
Ole Miss is
terrible.
not. Ole Miss isn't going to win games when they rush for 56 yards like they did
No,
in this game. You're not going to win those football games. So Ole
no,
Miss need Judkins to be really, really good like he was last year. And then they need Jackson Dart's not going to be able to do it by himself. Like
right.
I think Dart's a really good quarterback, and I've been actually fairly impressed with Dart so far. But it needs to be balanced, and we need more balance. We need maybe a little bit more tempo. Yeah, I don't know. I was kind of just unimpressed, kind of across the board from Ole Miss, especially at the last when Ole Miss was down 2 scores with the ball, and they chewed up most of the fourth quarter on the one drive that they did not score on. And it was like, guys, like we have to go here, like urgency, like let's go no
Yeah,
huddle. You guys, I mean, Lane Kiffin, he knows how to do this. This isn't new for him. Yeah, throw a little bit of tempo in there, do something. And they didn't. They just kind of went out with a whimper. It was disappointing.
yeah, for sure. Okay, Maryland beats Michigan State 31-9. West Virginia beat Texas Tech 20-13. How about Neil Brown there doing good
Yeah.
things? Iowa State beats Oklahoma State 34-27 in one of the sad bowls of the week. Georgia Tech beat Wake Forest 30-16. Good win there. Arizona beat Stanford 21-20. LSU squeaks by Arkansas 34-31. Penn State beat Iowa 31-0. We got to talk about this one just a little bit. This was an absolute spanking.
Do we, I mean, okay, I'm not really sure where to start, so like I'll just start here. Do you know how many total yards Iowa finished the game with?
Was it like it was?
76.
Yeah, it was under 100. I know that. Yeah.
76 yards. Yep, they had 4 first downs all
Oof.
game. They were 1 of 9 on third downs. And they only had the ball on offense for 33 plays. 33 plays.
Penn State had 97.
Penn State had not. That's like, what is that? Yeah, really close to triple, like almost triple. It could have been worse. Like, I don't have much else to say for you, but 31-0 as the final score, it could have been much worse.
Yeah.
The first down, yeah, Penn State had 28 first downs. Iowa had 4. Like, what else do you want from us here? Can we talk? We have to talk about Iowa, right? Like, I don't know if you could take a whole lot from Penn State here. I don't know if I did, but the time of possession here was 45 minutes for Penn State and 14 and a half for Iowa. 14 and a half. Like, I mean, Ferentz has to lose his job, right? Like, maybe both of them, right? This is really, really bad.
Yeah, I mean this is kind of the first point in the season, I think, where the ride to 325 almost looks impossible. Like,
Yeah.
I've been down on their chances to do it, average 25 points a game for the season.
Right.
Now it kind of just about feels impossible. Like, and so if you're an Iowa fan, I think you're glad. Like, you need to get rid of Brian Ferentz. And if it ticks Kirk off and he decides to retire, so be it. But you can't play football like this. You just can't do it.
You can. You won't win. Yeah, you'll
Right.
get blown out. No, I agree. 0 points. And honestly, like, they weren't even close to scoring. Like they were so far away from being competitive in this game. Penn State just sat on them. It was impressive from Penn State's defense. That defense is legitimately really, really good. But I'm not putting just a ton of stock into this from a Penn State standpoint. Like, I think Penn State's good separately.
Yeah.
But I'm not, just because they beat up on Iowa doesn't make Penn State good.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
They are good though.
Penn State's really good. Like, I'm not taking anything away from them at all, but like, yeah, like Iowa, that was a train wreck. That was a train wreck. I watched way too much of the game. It was, yeah, it's the worst display of offense that I've seen. I mean, I haven't seen a worse one. I've never seen a game be more one-sided. So yeah, he has to get to 325. Is that right? And I think that includes the bowl game. too. Is that right? Like he has to average the 25 points throughout the year and into the bowl game. He's hopelessly behind right now because he's only covered the one time. He had 41 last week. And that was the first game this year that he had gotten over 25. Yeah, and the 0 obviously not helping. Like that's a lot of points you're gonna have to score some other time. And dude, in the Big Ten, like with Iowa's offense, I don't know, man. Not sure.
Right. Okay. Northwestern beat Minnesota 37-34, 3-touchdown deficit at one point and came back. Very disappointing if you're Minnesota. South Carolina beat Mississippi State 37-30. Texas beat Baylor 38-6. North Carolina messed around for a little while and finally took care of Pitt 41-24. Kansas State beat UCF 44-31. Washington beat Cal 59-32 in a game that was not that close. USC beat Arizona State 42-28 in a game that was absolutely that close. And that brings us to one last game. Ashton, Ohio State goes to Notre Dame and they win 17-14. I'm going to let you talk, but first of all, as a Notre Dame fan, I just got to talk this one out a little bit myself. So obviously you remember last year, Ohio State played Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Last season they had Tyler Buckner and honestly some terrible receivers. That was the two biggest weaknesses on the team.
Yeah.
Their quarterback and their receivers. So against Ohio State, they ran the ball 56% of the time. This year, they bring in Sam Hartman out of the portal. They move Chris Tyree to receiver. They bring in some really good freshman receivers. They are one of the more explosive teams in the country through the air. Through 4 games, they are airing it out. So naturally, against Ohio State, who has some weaknesses in the secondary, they keep airing it out, right? They trust Sam Hartman? No. They increase their rushing rate against Ohio State to 61% this year with Sam Hartman on their team. But at least they used a lot of play action, right? No. They used play action on 11% of their dropbacks in this game. But they have been incredible at the end of each half so far. They have 3 2-minute drives to end 3 first half so far. So when they get the ball with 30 seconds left against Ohio State, and it's been a bit of a struggle, they have 2 timeouts left. They are aggressive and try to score, right? No, they kneel on the ball and go to halftime. You can see where I'm going with all this stuff. But anyway, we got so much more, Ashton. We got so much more. They finally are able to, using the running game, which they decided they're going to do, it finally works out. They score a couple touchdowns in the second half. And even going back to the first half and wherever, there was at different points, there were they faced 4th and 1 several times. Notre Dame had the nation's leading rusher coming into this game, Audric Estime. You may have seen him. 235 pounds is what he's listed at. He looks like a Greek god. The man is built like an absolute Abrams tank. Did they give him the ball on either one of those 4th and 1s? No, they did not do that. Both times they tried to run the ball with Sam Hartman, who is about 6 feet tall and probably weighs 180. I don't know. But all of that, they get the ball. Their defense makes some stops. They get the ball, one final drive. They just need a couple first downs. They need several first downs. They get one. Audric Estime gets another run, hit his first carry of the drive, 11 yards, first down. So they just keep feeding Audric Estime, right? No. They take him out of the game right after he just ripped off an 11-yard run against a gassed Ohio State defense. They then try some kind of slow developing, weird, stupid running play, and it gets blown up in the backfield for a 5-yard loss. So then they try a screen pass because they're in 2nd and 15. But at least they do it to Ohio State's weak defensive end, who's not known for always intercepting screen passes. Right? No. They do it right to JT Tuimoloau, who is their best defensive player, and he reads it out and knocks the ball down. Almost intercepts it, which maybe he should have if you're a Notre Dame fan. That would have been nice, as things turned out. But anyway, so Ohio State gets to save one timeout, which is definitely crucial, as we are going to see. We get into one final drive for Ohio State, where they have to march down the field. Notre Dame is playing great defense. Ohio State, though, keeps making big plays. Kyle McCord grows up, makes some big time throws. They have a 4th and 7 where they get a 7.5-yard gain. Just a great throw into a tight window, and they squeak it out. 3rd and 10, they find a way. They convert it. They get into the red zone, and Notre Dame tightens up a little bit. They get pressure on McCord, and he is called for intentional grounding. Ohio State still has that one timeout, so they avoid the 10-second runoff. We're down at 15 seconds at this point, so this would be huge. So they use that last timeout. They avoid the 10-second runoff, and now they face 3rd and 19. Now, all game, Kyle McCord, when given time to throw, has set his feet and just ripped it. When he was given time to throw all game, he made Notre Dame pay. Anytime he got a little bit of pressure, it messed with him. He couldn't make throws. And the only way Notre Dame could get pressure this entire game was by rushing 5 guys. Usually they had to blitz a linebacker, and they could get some pressure, and it would just force them into some bad throws. So 3rd and 19, you keep doing that, right? You rush 5 guys? No. You rush 3 and you drop 8. And you don't even make it look like you're going to blitz, like showing linebackers up at the line of scrimmage. You show him before the snap, you got 3 down linemen, and everyone else is very clearly back in a prevent defense. So what does he do? He rips the throw, 21-yard gain. Great throw, not taking anything away from that kid. Beautiful play. You get down to the 1-yard line. Ohio State spikes it. Notre Dame takes their last timeout. So at least Notre Dame comes out of that timeout with their best defense, their best goal line defense, right? No. They're in nickel. Even though Ohio State is in 12 personnel with only 2 receivers on the field, Notre Dame decides to play nickel. But at least they have all 11 players on the field, right, Ashton? No. They came out of that timeout with 10 players trying to play nickel, but at least it was one of their DBs they were missing, right? No, it was one of their defensive linemen on the 1-yard line. Miraculously, Ohio State throws an incomplete pass, so clearly they didn't notice that there was a big gaping hole in the left side of the line. But then Ohio State subs in a running back. So Notre Dame is saved. When the other team subs, you're allowed to sub too. You can get that 11th player onto the field, and the refs will keep them from snapping the ball until he gets in there. So that's what they do, right? No. Nobody freaking realized that they had 10 players on the field. Marcus Freeman didn't know. Al Golden didn't know. Al Washington, their defensive line coach, didn't realize he sent 3 defensive linemen onto the field coming out of a timeout. None of their veterans that were playing noticed. Nobody in the booth noticed. There's absolutely somebody up there who's responsible for this. Nobody noticed. So Ohio State happens to run. I still don't think Ohio State had any idea, but they call a running play. It happens to go right where there's a missing defender, and they score the game-winning touchdown by 6 inches. So props to Ohio State for scoring. I think you could put 86-year-old Lou Holtz at defensive end there, and it probably stops them. They made it by 6 inches without a player right there, without a defensive player right there. And by the way, there is a point to all of this, and it's not to say that Ohio State didn't deserve to win this game or that they were clearly the worst team or anything like that. I'm not taking any credit away from Ohio State. They absolutely deserve to win this game because Notre Dame clearly did not deserve to win this game. Everything I just pointed out was coaching. None of it was even players, because players messed up. Players on both sides messed up, but we watch college football and we're used to that. It's college football. They mess up. The players mess up. When your coaching staff has that many mistakes in a game, it's not because they're necessarily terrible coaches. It's because they absolutely crapped the bed. The moment was too big for them, and they choked when it mattered most. Al Golden called an excellent game for 59 minutes. And this is a guy who was coaching the Super Bowl 2 years ago, by the way, and has been a head coach for years and a defensive coordinator for years. This guy is way too experienced. But in the last minute, when it really mattered, the guy just puked himself all over national TV. And he wasn't the only one. Every coach in that program right now needs to look deeply inward and just ask themselves what the frick happened. As a Notre Dame fan, I've seen us lose many games tight against big programs. The difference is when we played Georgia in 2017 and 2019, when we played Oklahoma, there's too many to even count. But every time we lose one of these close games against a really good program, it's always, wow, like Notre Dame, they're better than we thought they were. That's overachievers. Like, man, props to them for really bringing it. Notre Dame played their B game in this game. Notre Dame did not maximize their talent. Neither did Ohio State. Like, neither team played to the best of their abilities. This is maybe the first time I've been able to point strictly at like so many coaching decisions in game as why Notre Dame lost. And it's just pathetic and heartbreaking. And people 18 years later are still talking about the Bush push. And 18 years from now, you'll be able to talk about 10 men on the field, and every Notre Dame fan will know exactly what you're talking about and will remember exactly where they were. And it just sucks. So I got more to talk. I got more to say, but Ashton, they're tired of hearing me ramble. What were your thoughts in this game?
I enjoyed it. It was obviously a very close game, very entertaining game. I think that both offenses were not very good. And I think both things are true. Like, the defenses did play well for both teams, but the offenses overall were not special. We didn't see Marvin Harrison pop off like what we're, used to seeing him do. It would have been nice if Notre Dame would have let Sam Hartman cook, like if we could just let that guy go into the kitchen for a while and just sling it for a bit. I was okay. Why not run tempo? Can anyone explain to me from either side in the first half, like from either side? Because there was only a field goal scored in the first half, and Ohio State made theirs. Notre Dame missed theirs, but it was 3-0 at halftime. Like, nothing's really working for you. Why not change it up a little bit and do something? Like, we've tried. Now we're going to try something else. I think that was kind of my thought in the first half. And Notre Dame, to their credit, in the second half, Notre Dame didn't shy away with running the ball. Like, they felt like they had an advantage running the ball, and they did. Like, they were successful. Yeah, and I understand, I guess, Notre Dame's standpoint, you don't want to get in a track meet with Ohio State. I guess I kind of get that. Notre Dame had a lot of chances to win this game. The potential interception on Ohio State's last drive that just went directly through his hands. And it's not like he was jumping terribly high to get it. It just barely went over his helmet. Hit him in both hands and went directly through it. And should have been a pick. The play calling on defense for Notre Dame at the end of the game was atrocious. I agree with you there. The one I noticed even more than the 10 men, because I did not realize that in real time. I just noticed that there was a gaping hole on the left side of Ohio State's offensive line. That's all I noticed there. The more atrocious one for me was the dropping eight. Dropping eight on 3rd and 18, or was it 3rd and 19, whatever it was, from like the 21, 22-yard line. Like, there was only 3 guys within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. Like you're not disguising any.
Exactly.
I was like, is there a possibility someone's going to sneak up and maybe make him think about it? No, it was like clearly everyone's bailing. We're rushing 3. That made no sense to me. You can drop 8, but you can drop 8 with 6 up at the line of scrimmage.
Confuse the quarterback.
Correct. You can still drop 8. In fact, that's sometimes even better because he didn't know who's coming. Like, he knows someone's coming. He just doesn't know what 3 or 4 it's going to be, So I guess my point was, you can still drop that. I would have preferred to blitz 6 and then just go tackle the hot route. Blitz 6 and tackle the hot route. That is a more high percentage play for you than just dropping everyone. I didn't understand that. It's not really defensible, I don't think. And then you're right. The 10 men on the field for the last two plays. I know Freeman has tried to kind of like defend it, saying that, we didn't want to get a penalty or whatever. Like you wouldn't have. Like there was a substitution. Like you came out of a timeout with it. Like you came out of a timeout.
I don't think they realized until they were almost ready to snap the ball the second time. Like I think that's when they finally realized. And well, if you run a guy out there, then you give Ohio State two chances, because it doesn't automatically stop the play if you have an 11th guy running out onto the field.
Right.
So I guess I get that, but if it happens just in a normal situation where you're subbing and it's chaotic, like that's bad enough.
Right.
Coming out of a timeout, it boggles the mind.
For me, I think I noticed a lot of Notre Dame was they weren't ready for the big moment. Like when at the end of the game, it was obviously very emotional, a lot of stuff happening. It was very intense. And you clearly let a lot of things slip through. There's no way that if you go back and replay this game and you're walking through it with Freeman and you come to that 3rd and 19, he's like, yeah, like we're not going to have anybody at the line of scrimmage. We're dropping everyone into coverage so everyone knows what we're doing. I mean, they're clearly going to play zone, right? Like they're clearly dropping into a deep shell. And like that he wouldn't do that again. So it was clearly a number of mistakes made by Notre Dame coaching at the end of that football game. Like that's all there is to it. I think it's hard to be prepared for those big moments. Like I think some teams make it look easy, but I think in Lane Kiffin would probably tell you the same thing when he played Alabama like this week. When the lights are on and when you put everything into that one game, sometimes like the moment does become too big for you. Sometimes it does. And I think there's some teams that have made it look easy. Like I think you think of like maybe some of the Clemson teams from a couple of years ago in 16 and 18, where they go and they match up with Alabama, or was it LSU? I guess they lost to LSU, but like Ohio State, they go match up against those teams and they play at their very, very best in those big games. And I think that's hard to do. Like, I think that's really difficult to do. And I think it's part of the growing process for Notre Dame. I think you learn from this. Ohio State they endured some questionable play calling at the end of the Georgia playoff game, right? You get to have these experiences. You get to go through it. It's painful for you, but you do get to grow. You do have an opportunity to grow. Notre Dame is like, I was actually really impressed with Notre Dame. Like Notre Dame could be a playoff team if they get their stuff together. They could easily win out. I think that's doable for the Irish. So Ohio State.
Sorry, I just have to say, like, breaking in there on that, like I guess, like, thank you, but I'm so tired of hearing that.
Yeah,
like,
fair enough.
Like last year, Notre Dame could have beaten Ohio State if they played an absolutely perfect game,
right,
and won the turnover battle and all of that. They didn't play all that well. Like the corners played well, and the offensive line played well.
They did. Yep.
And that's about it. Like, okay, they stopped the run pretty well, other than missing one tackle and giving up a 61-yard run. Other than that one big play, they stopped the run completely.
They shut down Marvin Harrison.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
The corners played excellent.
Played well. Certain players played well. Overall, that was their B game. Like, it's not like they played A+, and yet again, little Notre Dame comes so close to beating one of the big boys. They had everything in front of them to be one of the big boys, and they just didn't. Some of it is execution by the players. Yeah. Some of it is the coaching staff just absolutely crapping their pants.
People would tell me for years, right? Because under Kirby, it seemed that Georgia was always really close, and we were always close. We were never quite there, but we were always so close. And at the end of the day, you do get a lot of like, you guys are almost there. Like someday you'll break through. Someday something will happen, and you realize after a couple of years of it happening, like it's really not. Like this might just be us. Like we might just be the one that doesn't actually get there, because I mean, realistically, there's going to be teams that are going to get really, really close and not get there. And it's going to be most teams are not going to get there. You just have to kind of go take it. and you have to go take it from everyone else, and you don't want any moral victories. Like, I totally get the Notre Dame fans not wanting any moral victories today. Like, we played close, and if we didn't drop the pick, if we didn't drop 8 on 3rd and 19, if we had 11 players, maybe we win that game. And I mean, fair enough, I guess, but you didn't. You lost.
Exactly.
And like, it's devastating. And sometimes you just, as a fan, you almost just want, like, no, that sucked. We sucked in the last 2 minutes. Like, we should have finished stronger because you had done all the hard work. Like, you had done all the difficult things. And something that gets overlooked a lot is Notre Dame had the ball with 4 minutes left, and you had a potentially go on a 4-minute drive, 4-minute offense, and kill the clock out. And just, then game over. That's it.
Yeah.
And you had 2 first downs. And then that's when the play calling started to get funky. And like, that's when it's like why are we now not running up the middle? Like, we've worked all game to get
they were being super conservative all game.
And we've taken body blows. That,
but the upside of that was then you wore their defense out. So now you can pound it. And then now we're going to get aggressive. I didn't understand that either. What's the point of all the body blows, in quarters 1 through 3, if you don't try to, make those pay off and, late in the fourth quarter with 4 minutes left, like when you need it, like when you want to run the ball for 6 yards per play and just grind this out. Completely agree. Audric Estime got 14 carries in a game that 61% of their plays were runs.
It wasn't enough. Was not enough.
Yeah, they played 5 running backs. I think in a game like this, you'd pick your best 3, and your best 1 should get the bulk.
Yeah, he should have gotten like 60% of the carries. In my eyes,
right. And I just want to say this, like, for all the Ohio State fans that are listening to this and are just enraged at all the excuses, I'm not taking a thing away from Ohio State. Ohio State did not crap the bed, like, in the big moment. They were prepared in the big moment. They took advantage. They converted some huge 3rd and 4th downs on that last drive. Kyle McCord, you can give him time to throw, but he still has to make the throw, and he did. They took advantage. That's what you need to do. My whole point is, from the Notre Dame perspective, they had this game in hand and decided just to give it away. Like, that's what happened. And it sucks. Any more thoughts before we move on?
No, not really. I mean, we can talk about this game for a long time, and there's a ton of, like, it was just on a razor's edge there at the end and could have gone either way, and it felt like it should have went Notre Dame's way, and it didn't. And you could talk about that for a really long time, but I think smart just to move on. Kyle McCord, I don't know. Maybe that's kind of what I have to say about him. Maybe
he's fine.
He's fine. I think, again, like, Penn State's going to heat him up, right? Michigan is going to blitz the heck out of that guy, and we'll see what he's made of then. I think that's Notre Dame could have done more to neutralize that offense. And honestly, they only gave up 17 points, and 7 were on the last play of the game, right? So, like, the defense played well, I guess. But from the Ohio State standpoint, like, we'll see. This was not their toughest test. They have 2 games that are even bigger for them yet, with Penn State, who looked really good, and Michigan still coming up. So it's a good start. There's still a lot left for Ohio State.
Oftentimes, after games like this, when 2 top 10 teams play and it's really close, there's a tendency for the losing side to say afterwards, well, that's a really good team. Like, that's probably a national title contender.
Yeah.
And I think our team, like, if we're just a little bit better, like, we could be there too. And I don't feel that way. I feel like both of these teams are not close to their ceiling right now, the way they played Saturday. I think both of them could be national title contenders if they figure it out. Neither one of them has figured it out yet. Penn State or Michigan, they're going to beat Ohio State unless Ohio State gets better. And they can get better. Notre Dame, same way. They need to get better to beat USC and Clemson. They just need to. And I'm not going to try to say, well, these are actually 2 of the top 4 teams in the country. They could be. They're not right now. That, I don't know that I have a whole lot more to say.
Should we just go on to next week?
Yeah, let's move on to next week.